caffeinated. I was stargazing. Life goes on. I need all my babies. Woke up looking for the broccoli. High key, keep a horn on me. That could my seat. IP ownership. The blueprint is by me. Mr. Get Off, I get off at my feet. A yeet nigga couldn't try me in a tri-state. Buddy pass, but I get him splashed till he hydrated. Bounce out, know he spook town, eyes dilated. I got the money and the power, both gyrating. I feel good, get the fuck out my thighs. Look good, but she don't got no ties. I walked in, walked out with the size. Man, don't let me know what the price. What the fuck? I got hits, I got bucks, I got new paper cuts, I got friends, I got foes, but they all sitting ducks. Hit his turf and get cracking, double back like a deluxe. 50 deep, but it ain't deep enough. Fuck a plea, there you go, beat him up. Falling from a money tree, and it grew throughout the month. Spit a loogie at the camera, speed it off, yeah, it's us. I feel good, get the fuck out my thighs. Look good, but she don't got no ties. I walked in, walked out with the size. Man, don't let me know what the price. Squabble up, 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 squabble up. Hold up, where you from? Bye, bitch. I'm finna go dumb. Sideways, bunk skunk, fever. I'm on one. Thunk, 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 baby, rockin' it. Quid pro quo, what you want, cause I'm watching it. Work on the floor.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are so glad you're here tonight. Welcome to the Climate Fight Ahead. My name is Jamie Henn. I'm the Executive Director of Fossil Free Media.
And I'm Cassidy DiPaola, the Communications Director at Fossil Free Media, and we are going to be your guides for tonight's program.
So, Fossil Free Media runs campaigns and provides communication support for the broader climate movement, and we couldn't do anything we do without the support of our incredible partners who helped make tonight possible. This event we're sponsoring from our Make Polluters Pay campaign, which is working to hold big oil accountable for the damage that they're doing to our climate and communities. Absolutely. We'll be talking more about that tonight. And if we could show our partners up on the screen, we want to just shout out some of the amazing organizations that came together to make tonight possible. There are a lot of them, so I won't read every single one, but special thanks to the Sunrise Movement, Sierra Club, Hip Hop Caucus, Chesapeake Climate Action Network, Greenpeace USA, 350, Friends of the Earth, all the groups here at GW that turned out and helped get students here tonight. We are deeply thankful for your work, and none of it would be possible without you.
Tonight is all about building and strengthening our movement. It's been a little less than a month since the election, and we're already experiencing the daily chaos that is to be expected from a second Trump term. But we know that this chaos is a strategy. It's meant to destabilize and demoralize us, to knock us off course, to make us forget exactly who and what we're fighting for. But tonight is about shining a light on the path ahead. Over the next couple of hours, we're going to be looking back on all that we've accomplished over the past 4 years, on what still needs to get done in the Biden administration's final days, and how we can keep up the fight for climate justice, for clean energy, and for an end to fossil fuels under a Trump administration. Our goal is for you to walk out of here tonight feeling inspired and with a clear idea of how you can take action in the coming days and months and years ahead.
We've got a road ahead. And so, as Cass said, we will be your MCs for tonight's evening. And we couldn't think of a better speaker to kick off the incredible lineup that we have than someone who's been a leader in our movement for decades, a community organizer, a U.S. Air Force veteran, a minister, a hip-hop icon, the campaign chair of Beyond Petrochemicals, and the president and CEO of the Hip Hop Caucus, the one and only Reverend Lennox Yearwood Jr.
Woo!
I'm so glad that this was called the Climate Fight Ahead rally, because it's clear for our movement that we are not in an argument, but a fight. Yeah, you can clap to that. My friend Annie Leonard gave me that line, so she thought she would clap much sooner than that, than when the line was read. We are at a critical moment, and I want to say that what's clear in this moment is that we must have courage. Jamie came to me and clearly wanted me to give the grounding of the moment. And so with that, the grounding is for me to be a historian. And being a historian, I look back at the March on Washington that wasn't too far from where we're sitting and standing right now. In 1963, they were planning to march on Washington, which was in August of that year. But in June, Medgar Evers was assassinated in Mississippi. And they thought about canceling the March on Washington. There were folks who even jeering at them and said, we'll do to him, and it's going to also happen to you. But they persevered. And they marched on. And that's what this moment is right now. It is a moment of courage that we must have to march on. But before we march on, there's some things that we have to do as a movement. And the one thing I would say is that we have to be a much more compassionate climate movement moving forward. We can't have white paper energy, and I mean that in its true sense. As we move forward, we must be understanding so that, for instance, when Hurricane Helene happened, there will be speakers here tonight, when that happened and we were ready to move on to Hurricane Milton, we forgot about those who had lost everything. And even in that situation when they had lost everything, and FEMA said there was no money, and they were only given $750 to repair their homes, and billions were going overseas, we did not connect the dots that billions are going to fossil fuel industry for subsidies and taxes. We did not connect the dots. Even right now, when it was Thanksgiving and they were still rebuilding their homes, we were still sulking about an election when humans, Republicans and Democrats, were trying to rebuild their lives. I know this because from dealing from the aftereffects of Hurricane Katrina, I remember what it felt like when the climate movement left us behind. And they could no longer create trauma porn of using our people, black, brown, and indigenous people dying in the streets. That kind of movement can't exist. We must be a compassionate climate movement moving forward. And so with that, there are those who are watching this tonight. There are those who are watching this in Exxon and BP and Shell. I'm telling you, they are. They're watching the live stream. They thought they had tuned in for a funeral. But what they tuned in for was halftime. Because I heard the goal was to get to 2030. So that means that this is a locker room speech for the climate movement. And so, in that note, are y'all ready to get started? That's not good enough. Are you ready to get started? That's a little better. So, I need you, because I'm going to bring out the first speaker. And I need you, because there are those who are watching this right now. There are those who are watching this in Louisiana. Next year marks the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. And please make sure and check out Hip Hop Caucus to be a part of Katrina 20. But there are those who are watching this right now. And there are those who are watching this in this industry. And they think we're done. Are we done? No. Are we done? No. Okay. So I'm going to introduce this next speaker. And I kind of told her this. And so she's probably somewhere backstage. They're going to get her. But we need to be as hyped because she's, to me, one of the most amazing people that I know in this movement. And we're going to raise the roof off this place. Are y'all ready for that? Okay. So, first thing you have to do to raise the roof, you got to stand up. You got to stand up where you are. Y'all ready? Oh, y'all not ready. They're watching. They're going to be so shocked. They think they were tuning in for a funeral, but they have tuned in to the movement, understanding that we are still going to win. Are y'all ready? Okay. So coming to the stage right now is one of the most amazing actors we have ever seen. She has written books. She has done her own PAC to make sure we can have politicians who can do the right thing in office. She's somebody who, despite her age, and I won't say her age, but she looks like she's my age. Despite that, she has been at the forefront of this movement, bringing together black and brown and indigenous people of color, understand the importance of culture, understand the importance of us coming together and fighting. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Then somebody make some noise for the one, the only, Jade Fonda!
Thank you very much. Thanks, Reb. Thank you. In the fall and winter of 2019, together with Greenpeace, I held rallies every Friday in front of the Capitol. We called them Fire Drill Fridays. And after the rally, we would engage in nonviolent civil disobedience and get arrested. And this is the coat that I wore. And this coat was my blanket and my pillow when I turned 82 in jail. This coat represents resistance. And so, standing here today in my red coat, I hereby declare myself part of the resistance. And I hope you'll join me. Will you join me? Yes. We must not turn inward. We must not silence ourselves or normalize what will likely happen. Actually, we don't know what's going to happen. Turns out he didn't get a landslide. 1.5% does not a landslide make, or a mandate. In fact, it was the third smallest margin since 1888, just so you know. We don't know what's going to happen. Democratic guardrails may well hold, you know? But we know about Project 2025 and what they're trying to do, and we're right to be in shock and angry and scared. But we have to be brave and smart now. And we have to be together. We have to stand and face the coming years together. Okay? Have any of you ever seen documentaries about some of the great movements, you know, anti-apartheid, anti-slavery, the women's movement, civil rights movement, and watched one of those documentaries and wondered, as I have, would I have taken on the dogs and the hoses? Could I have? Would I have been on the bridge? Would I have gone on one of those hunger fasts? Well, guess what? We don't have to ask anymore. This is it. This is our documentary moment, folks. We're being tested. I want to be brave. I want my children to be proud of me. But we're being tested. And so here are some thoughts. 78 million Americans voted for Trump. They are not all part of the MAGA movement. Many of them did so because they're suffering financially. They're scared, they're confused, and they're angry because the neoliberal leaders of the Democratic Party have ignored them for so many decades. And so they took a chance on the burn it all down option. It's quite possible that before too long, those Trump voters are going to be hurting even more because the tariffs and mass deportations, if they happen, will wreak havoc with the economy. They will realize that he is not taking the country forward. And we have to be ready to welcome them into our tent. We cannot be judgmental. We have to understand. We have to open our hearts. And it won't be what we say to them that matters. It will be how we make them feel. I want to tell you a story. In 1970, I left my family in France and came back to the United States to join the anti-war movement. I had been radicalized by American soldiers who deserted to Paris and had told me the truth about the Vietnam War. I arrived just as Barbarella was opening. And I was not exactly met with enthusiasm by the women's movement. How could you have, didn't you realize you were being used, and so forth? And I was just like, I had never met any activists. I didn't know anything about movements. And I didn't feel very welcomed, but I was part of the civilian GI movement, active duty servicemen who were against the war. And all around the country, it was a very important part of the peace movement, all around the country, outside of military bases, they were called GI coffee houses, usually run by women, where guys could come and find out about Vietnam, learn the history, ask questions, and so forth. And I was in the town of Killeen, Texas, near Fort Hood. The GI coffee house was called the Oleo Strut, and it was run by Terry Davis. When I was with her, I felt different than I ever had. She didn't see me as a celebrity. She asked me questions. Why had I become an anti-war activist? She asked me how I was feeling. She wanted to know if she could help me prepare for the rally that was coming in a few days. She treated everyone with respect that way. It was clear that she cared. She felt that she treated the GIs that way. And as a result, they would come when there was a feminist talking about the new women's movement, and they would listen because they trusted her, because they knew she didn't judge them. Being with her was like looking through a keyhole to the world that we were fighting for. And I knew that I wanted to be on her team. We have to be like her now. We have to be open to what's coming. We have to welcome people who voted in ways that we can't comprehend, and we have to bring them into our tent. Learning to listen, it's therapeutic listening, listening with your heart and not judging. It's going to serve us well in the coming years. And now I want to suggest 2 strategic priorities for our movement. 1, I think we have to focus on down-ballot races. Governors, mayors, city councils, state legislators, land commissioners. This is where the robust climate work has been happening already, and it's going to continue. And that's why 3 years ago we created the Jane Fonda Climate PAC, which has been helping to elect climate champions down ballot all over the country. This year we endorsed 154 candidates, and they won 2-1, which is interesting, you know. You see, so many of our elected officials, Democrats every bit as much as Republicans, are taking money from the fossil fuel industry. And so they block any progress that we attempt. One of my ex-husbands had a saying, lead, follow, or get out of the way. Well, these oily electeds have to get out of the way, you know. Jane PAC has a motto: if you can't change the people, change the people. If you want to know more about our work, go to janepac.com. Now, secondly, this is the federal level. We're not going to get a lot passed unless it's budget related. And the biggest upcoming fight is going to be around renewing Trump's tax credits, which wealthy people and corporate executives love, but it means slashing vital social and environmental programs. Right now, this is the perfect context for us to demand an end to the $20 billion tax breaks and subsidies that we give to the fossil fuel industry every year. It's exciting. This is the second strategic priority that I want you to grok. Y'all know what grok means, right? Yeah, okay. Do we want our electeds to give hard-earned tax dollars of ours to polluters or to our communities? You bet. I mean, I've had to get a night guard because I grind my teeth at night. I am so angry. I mean, businesses are closing, schools and libraries and hospitals are hurting. Apparently, half of Americans only have $500 in the bank, if that, and many of them don't even have a bank account. And yet, we are giving $20 billion of our tax monies to the very industry that's killing us, poisoning our air, poisoning our water, and destroying our climate. It's obscene. And this is a perfect time to fight for this, because there's a whole lot of people, including Republicans, who won't like this one bit. They just don't know about it yet. This is where you come in. We need to let everybody know about this, so spread the word. We need to make this tax fight excruciating for Congress members. We got to make them sweat and squirm. Let them know that if they vote for these subsidies to the wealthiest corporations in human history, we'll make sure their constituents know when they're up for re-election. And so we're in a school here, the great university. And students cut their teeth. Many, many students years ago cut their teeth on the divestment campaign, stopping private investment to the fossil fuel industry. And it's continuing today, and it's deprived the oil companies of some trillions of dollars. It's been wildly successful. And so it's kind of fitting, don't you think, that a new generation of students leads the way on this fight to deprive them of public money, our tax dollars. So students, I can't see you out there. I hope there are students here. We're on a campus. Yes? Okay. While you're here in D.C., visit the offices of your senators and House members. Go tomorrow. Let them know you'll be watching how they vote. Inexcusable for them to support fossil fuel subsidies when their constituents are hurting. And when you go home to their districts, haunt their district offices, bird dog them in public, make them promise to not give our public money to big oil and gas, make them sweat and squirm. Even if we don't win, but listen, even if we don't win this time, this budget round, we got to keep going because we're laying the path for later. Ideas that get picked up are ideas that are ready to go. And we have 4 years to incubate this. Dig this. If we can eliminate fossil fuel subsidies, up to a third of their projects will be no longer viable. It's the beginning of the end. So this is really important. So let's do this. Yes, it's going to be hard. It'll be hard, but it'll also be fun, and you won't be alone. You know, activism is the way to rise above despair and feel hope, to feel your life has a meaning, to make friends who inspire you and share your values. So join me and resist. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane and Reverend Yearwood, for that powerful framing. Woo! We can spread out a little. We're in a critical moment, not just with the Trump election, but with 50 days remaining in Biden's presidency to secure real climate victories. With that, I'd like to introduce Mahiar Saru, Saul Levin, and Danny Hupper to discuss what's at stake. Saul, let's start with you. Why are these next 48 days so critical, and what kind of organizing needs to happen in this time?
Yeah, thanks. Hey, everybody. Good to see you. I'm Saul Levin. Very glad to be with you today. So we started a campaign the day after Donald Trump was elected called Every Day Counts. Because Democrats love to be like, wow, Trump got elected. What are we going to do in February? But Democrats still control the Senate, and there's still a Democrat in the White House. You don't see him very much, but he's still there. And there are loads of things that we can do and loads of wins we can secure. I'm just going to talk about a couple of them briefly, but I want to illustrate a broader point. We have a few dozen days, we have a few weeks left until Donald Trump is in the White House, and there's this notion being spread around that anything Joe Biden does could be undone by Trump. So why would we try anything? First of all, that's false. So if someone tells you that, it's because they don't want to do anything. And second of all, why wouldn't you do something just to make Trump's life more difficult when he comes into office? But let's talk about this, because it's not just executive actions, right? It's more complex than that. If Joe Biden said, every Democratic governor, we're going to have a Zoom call, I want you to move as much money as possible from the bipartisan infrastructure law towards public transportation to meet our climate goals, a lot of them would do it. But they're like, oh, we don't have formal power through the executive authority, blah, blah, blah. Snooze. It's so boring. You could literally do that with the bully pulpit today. The Friday before Thanksgiving, okay, Josh Shapiro, not a particularly inspiring progressive voice on climate, after pressure from local unions and transit organizers, moved over $100 million to public transportation that he already had. Do you understand? Any of them could do that. If your governor says, I don't have more money for public transportation, they're fucking lying to your face, okay? Now, there's many other actions on labor issues. The Senate needs to fill every judicial appointment. What is Trump going to do about that? The president needs to push through his nominee through the Senate for the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board. What is the Senate going to do about, what is Donald Trump going to do about that? We need to pardon Leonard Peltier and Stephen Donziger and other political environmental prisoners. So if you're wondering what you can do, don't be like, oh, maybe I'll join a climate organization, February, March, when I'm free. Hit us up today because we're throwing down. We're going to protect public lands. We're going to designate national monuments. We're going to fund trains. We're going to fund buses. And it's honestly a lot of fun because it's like, damn, we got to go hard as hell for 48 days and then we can regroup. So let us know if you want to get involved. Thank you so much for having us today. And to close, I just want to have y'all join me in saying, every day counts. Every day counts. Every day counts. Y'all got to be louder than that. Come on, y'all. Every day counts. Every day counts. Every day counts. All right, thanks, y'all.
Thank you so much, Saul. I'm going to start saying snooze every time someone's boring me, so watch out. Mahyar, from your perspective, what are the top fossil fuel actions we need to see from the Biden administration in the next 48 days?
Yeah, thank you. And hi, everyone. I'm Mahyar Saru. I'm with the Sierra Club. Okay, that's very nice. Anyway. So as Saul said, right, we are at a critical moment. There are only months, weeks left for this administration to do everything they possibly can to make the next administration and Trump and all of his greedy and corrupt cronies have a more challenging time trying to do everything they can to roll back all the progress that has been made these last 4 years by the Biden-Harris administration. One of them being on LNG exports. We just had a huge win in January, which I know folks are going to get into later, on putting a pause on new and pending applications at DOE for exporting our gas overseas. The administration right now needs to stop and cancel the 6 pending projects that are sitting at the Department of Energy. He can do that right now at a stroke of a pen. The Department of Energy has the authority to cancel these projects. CP2, Commonwealth, I won't bore you with all the projects, but they are critical. We know that the unfettered build-out of LNG exports harms our communities, raises our energy prices, is detrimental to the future that we all want to live, which is a world free of fossil fuel expansion. So the administration right now can take action to stop LNG exports, stop these 6 projects, and do everything they can to finalize those studies, the analysis that DOE needs to complete to ensure that when the next administration comes in and tries to rubber stamp all of these projects, we're not going to let them do it without a fight. We're going to sue the hell out of them when they think they're going to try to ram these projects down next year. So LNG, right? We got a lot they can do on LNG. We also have a huge opportunity to rise up with the Standing Rock and Cheyenne River Sioux tribes to stop and shut down the dirty and dangerous and, quite frankly, illegal Dakota Access Pipeline that is currently operating. Right now, the Army Corps of Engineers can deny the pending permit that is currently sitting at that agency. They can, with a stroke of a pen, deny that permit, shut down that pipeline, and we'll see if the Trump administration tries to ram it through once that happens. But they can do everything they can. We got to get that pipeline shut down. Last thing I will say, Jane Fonda was absolutely right. We subsidize and incentivize fossil fuel production at a rate that is just completely unacceptable in this country. Whether it's the billions of dollars we have in our tax code to the fossil fuel industry, and whether it's the international support that we provide the fossil fuel industry through the Export-Import Bank. We have an opportunity right now for the Biden administration to cut off that funding and cut off that spigot of funds that currently incentivizes fossil fuel development abroad. So please get involved. We have to end the era of fossil fuels. As Saul said, every special place that is a national monument, our public lands are a part of the climate solution. Let's get the Biden administration to designate as many national monuments as possible before he leaves office. So whether it's LNG, whether it's Dakota Access Pipeline, whether it's stopping financing fossil fuels, whether it's national monuments, the list goes on and on. There is no time to waste. We have to urge the administration to act now.
Thank you so much, Mahiar. There is absolutely no time to waste. And Danny, can you speak about getting IRA money out the door and how action will now turn towards the states?
Well, great, Cassidy. Thank you so much. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Danny Hupper. I'm Evergreen Action's Campaigns Director, and it is an honor to be on stage with these two people, Sal and Mahiar. And Mahiar, I just want to give a particular shout out to you. Thank you for your leadership around LNG. And I just wanted to say that I totally agree that one of the most important things the Biden administration can do in these last final weeks is reject those LNG project permits. So totally want to underscore that. Another very important thing that the administration can do in their final weeks is get that IRA money out the door. We want to get it from federal coffers into state coffers so that it's not vulnerable to a future Republican administration. Some of you may have seen that there was a Reuters article that came out this morning that said $100 billion have already been obligated of the IRA money. That is light speed. That is very fast, and the administration should be commended for that. But we also don't want to leave any IRA dollars on the table or make it, potentially vulnerable to being clawed back. So we want to, it's absolutely critical that we tell our friends in the federal agencies that they should be using every single tool in their tool belt, get creative about making sure that money gets out the door by the time we transition to a new administration. Another thing I want to say is I think it's really important that we activate our Democratic members of Congress who fought for the IRA to begin with. I'm not saying anybody's doing this, but we shouldn't throw up our hands and say the IRA is cooked, we shouldn't be fighting tooth and nail for every single dollar. We need to fight tooth and nail for every single dollar. Mahiar and I were just at a conference today with a lot of those members of Congress who fought for the IRA. They are eager and excited and committed and looking to us as movement leaders to think about how we can best defend the IRA when it's inevitably up for reconciliation on the floor. And I think it's incumbent on us as leaders to help them, to support them, make sure that they know that we have their back, give them the resources, give them the information that they need to defend the IRA and the important IRA programs as much as possible. And then the last thing is you talked about states. States is where the ball game is at. States is where the bold, ambitious climate progress is happening. But I do want to say that we're in a better place than we were 2 years ago. This is a good thing for me to remember. 2 years ago, or now we have more Democratic governors, we have more Democratic trifectas. I think there are 13 states that have both a Democratic House and Senate. That's incredible. We're also 2 years into the IRA, so we have more stories to tell, we have more gains on the ground, we have more benefits across the country. So we're in a better place. We need to let our state and local friends know that they are the people who need to fill in this vacuum at the federal level. And not only are we looking at them, they can be leaders and really do this. And if you are interested, you can go to evergreenaction.com to check out all the other ways that states are going to be leaders here and that we're going to defend against Trump attacks in the next 4 years.
Woo! Everyone, please give it up for Mahiar, Saul, and Danny. So, we've heard about what needs to happen in Biden's final days. And now it's time to talk about what these decisions mean for communities on the ground. We have a very special sneak preview of a new, I guess coming soon, Greenpeace documentary about LNG expansion in the Gulf South. It features many of you in the audience, beautiful people. It features our lovely friend Jane Fonda, and it features our next speaker, Roshetta Ozane. So before we have Roshetta come out, let's play this awesome preview.
Looks like we're driving into a shitstorm.
Yeah, we are, literally.
I've been traveling from the Permian Basin, kind of following the pipelines down to the coast.
It's shocking. Massive clouds of methane coming through.
Are you depressed yet?
I'm so angry. People are dying all along the way because of the pollution.
Liquefied natural gas, or LNG, and the U.S. is now the world's top supplier.
LNG is liquefied natural gas, but there's nothing natural about it.
This is what clean energy looks like in Louisiana here. There's been periods where they flared 24 hours a day for 30 days.
Methane is the most dangerous of the greenhouse gases.
And they bring the cattle in. Cattle graze on that ground, so I would eat that beef.
We know one thing. They had a lot more shrimp and a lot more oysters before this place was built.
There's a lot of cancer in the community.
A lot of cancer in the community.
We're dealing with powerful interests around us.
It's just redacted.
Entire pages.
When the government says that the industry is going to bring tax dollars to your community, they're lying to you.
The system is what's killing us and erasing us from the face of the earth.
You have countries like Germany, they've banned the practice of fracking on their own lands, but those countries are building import terminals to receive fracked gas from the United States.
Our communities are dying, our people are dying, our environment is dying.
There is a constant anticipated grief of who will be next.
I hereby promise you that I will do everything in my power until the day I die to make sure people know what's going on here.
We're not giving up, and we want you to know that.
Thank you, Greenpeace, for letting us show that incredible preview. We're so excited for the documentary to come out. Our next speaker, Roshetta Ozane, has been, you can shout, I heard that. Woo! Roshetta has been leading the fight in Sulphur, Louisiana, in DC, and across the world, building powerful resistance against the proliferation of LNG exports. I want everyone to give a warm welcome to Roshetta Ozane.
I, too, sing America. Is it working? Hey, y'all, can y'all hear me? Oh, my goodness. I did not expect this turnout. First, let me thank all of you for being here tonight. I know you could be anywhere else in the world, but you decided to be here because you know how critical this moment is. If you've ever sat back and you've asked yourself, what can I do about the climate crisis? I'm just one person. I'm so small. How can I fix this major problem? Well, you started by coming here tonight. So thank you. Give yourselves a round of applause. Now, many of you have heard about me. You've probably seen me speak or heard me speak. You just saw me in that clip. I wasn't the star, Jane was. But what you may not know is that for me to come here tonight, I had to leave my 6 children at home. I left them home in Louisiana because they had to go to school, and the school board already doesn't like me because I fight them a lot on like the tax breaks that they give to industry. So they're looking for a reason to like come after me. They're like, if these kids miss one more day, we're going to get them. So my children had to go to school, so I had to leave them to come here. Well, what you don't know about my children is that some of them have health issues that they're dealing with. 3 of them have asthma, they have eczema, and my 18-year-old son has epilepsy. This is a seizure disorder that he was not born with. He started having seizures last year at 17 years old when he was driving home from Westlake. That's a small town at the foot of the I-10 bridge by Lake Charles, to where we live in a town called Sulphur. Yes, that sulfur. It smells just like it. Well, on his way home, he had to pass in between these industries on Sulphur Avenue because this is a stretch of street that's full of industries, all kinds. You probably saw some in the video. It's a mixture of oil, gas, different types of refineries on this stretch of road. And as he was driving, he had a seizure with my 5-year-old in the back seat. He totaled the car, and he was on life support for a week. But thank God he made it. Well, after that, we went to several doctors in Louisiana looking for answers. And as we were looking for these answers, we kept hearing the same thing, like, you know, everybody can have a seizure once in their life, or it's okay, he'll never have another seizure, he'll be fine. That was just a freak accident, you know? And I'm like, no, my son has never had a seizure. He was by these industries. He was on life support. Like, I'm putting it all together. I'm not a doctor, but something is off here. So we were not happy with those results in Louisiana. And thank goodness for great friends like Jane, who is a star, who would never tell you this story. We were able to get to a doctor in California. When we went to this doctor, we continued to ask her, is the industrial pollution a cause of his seizures? And she told us yes. Though the pollution that he's dealing with every day could be contributing to the fact that he's now having seizures. After that, my son continued to have seizures. He's still having seizures. So those doctors in Louisiana who said this is a one-time thing were clearly wrong. But this is what we're dealing with in our community. We wake up, we see pollution, we smell pollution. We can't drink water from the faucet, even though I have to pay the city of Sulphur for my water. I can't use it. We have homeowners insurance that is through the roof. We can't afford the insurance because the insurers tell us that they have to raise our premiums, get this, because of climate-induced disasters. Well, guess who's insuring the projects that are contributing to those disasters? Those same insurance companies. Now, I didn't come here to trauma dump, but I do want you all to understand that in our communities, we are real people. It's great to see celebrities, and it's great to see congressmen and senators stand up here and talk to you, but what you rarely get to see is the true stories from the people who live there. And I said the word stories. I said the word stories just now because a lot of people always say, tell your stories, tell your stories. But I want you to understand that these are our real lives. We are real people. This is not fiction. No one is paying me to be here. If they were, I would be bedazzled in jewels. Like, I am a girly girl. I would have diamonds and fur, you know, if I was getting paid to be here, but I'm not. I chose to leave my children in Louisiana to come here because we are at a critical moment. We can continue to go backwards because when you hear the word fossil fuel, I mean, when I think of fossils, that's something in the past, dinosaur age. Like, we're supposed to be moving to the future, renewables, new. Why are we going backwards? It is time that these decision makers who sit here in DC, who don't get a chance to go into wetlands and go crabbing off the side of the road like we do. Y'all, we can just drive in Louisiana, in Southwest Louisiana, pull over, catch a dozen crabs, and go home and make crab stew. Y'all can't do that here. We can literally go in our backyards and dig up crawfish. We can go shrimping and we can feed our families. But all of that is being threatened by this industry that continuously is being approved by decision makers here in DC. It is time out for that. We can't take it anymore. Our families are literally dying. If you've never met Sharon Levine from Ride St. James, if you've never met James Hyatt of For a Better Bayou, or Melanie Odom from Freeport, Texas, or Jenny, who was in the video from Corpus Christi, you have not done your work. You have not been to these communities, because as soon as you pull up in those communities, these are the people on the front lines. There are so many more. So if anybody is making a decision and they don't know these names, they're not doing their work. Come to our communities. Smell the air. Ask Jane how it smells, because she came. She came, she took a tour. She smelled the rotten eggs. She smelled the chemicals. She even ate some of my gumbo, y'all. I was proud of my gumbo. But come and visit us and see that we're real. When these developers offer their maps of their projects that they want to get approved, we're not on there. You're not going to see Manny Rollinson's house on that map. You're not going to see Gwen Jones's house on that map. We are real people. You're not going to see Joe and Joy Banner listed on their maps. They show an open space that they want to build this giant project, and they act as if we don't exist. Well, the reason we're here tonight is to say that we do exist, we're real people, and it is high time that this administration, while it still has power, before the next administration comes in, because let me tell you, a couple of weeks ago, I didn't have any hope, y'all. I was like, oh my God, we done lost, we might as well just all move, because I felt like we are gonna go backwards. I felt like after the election results that everything we've worked so hard for was gonna go down the drain. But no, this is giving me the momentum to fight, to see these chairs full of people, to see so many people backstage lined up to speak to this issue, because it's so important. The Biden administration still has time to make some real changes. We need those IRA funds to get to communities immediately. Now, that doesn't mean pushing out these false solutions like carbon capture and storage and direct air capture and hydrogen hubs and all of that. That means getting money to organizations like mine, like Freeport Haven, like Better Brazoria, getting funds to those organizations who are ensuring that their community members have what they need to survive every day. I just told you, we can't even drink the water from our faucets. People are having to buy water in addition to paying a water bill. People can't grow food in the soil around their homes because the soil is poisoned. We need money for everyday needs and everyday resources so that our community members can be in a place to then fight. Now, I'm working on my PhD, and I don't want to become a teacher up here, but many of you have probably heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And when you think about this pyramid and you think about the bottom, those physiological needs, people aren't even having those needs met. But we expect people to be at the self-actualization stage. That is the stage where people fight against things that are harming them. People are down here. How do we expect them to get up here to fight against oil and gas, to fight against industry, to fight against climate crisis that they're facing? They can't. We have to take care of people. We have to put people first. And we're begging this administration to make way for that. Get those funds down to community organizations and to people. We're also asking that they speed up this process with this public interest determination. Now, I'm the public, and I can say it's not in my best interest. Hey, let's help them out. If you feel like fossil fuels are in the best interest of the public, raise your hand. Okay, DOE, we wrapped up the study for you. Like, what is taking them so long? If we're the public, what is taking them so long? We don't want it. We've proven this. We had over 75,000 people in the streets of New York last year. We had 30,000 people in the streets of New York this year. Like, what else do we have to do? People have said they don't want it. Speed up the process so that we can get funding down to communities for renewable energy sources, so that we can have an equitable energy transition, so we can have a just transition off of fossil fuels. Again, I want to thank you all so much for being here tonight and for allowing me to speak to you. You all have been amazing. Y'all have a good night.
Can we give it up? Can we give it up for Roshetta one more time? It's leaders like Roshetta that keep us inspired to stay in this fight. And as Roshetta said, that leadership we know is coming from our communities, from the front lines, from people who are facing the daily reality of fossil fuels. But as Roshetta said, we also need leadership here in DC and in Congress. We need politicians who are willing to listen to communities, who are willing to work with our movement to put forward visionary policy and then do the hard work in the halls of Congress to fight to make it real. I can't think of another politician who has been in this fight longer, who has been more engaged with our movement, who has done more to work with his community, to work with young people all across the country than our next speaker. He is the Senate author of the Green New Deal. He was my representative growing up in Boston, Massachusetts, the one and only Senator Ed Markey.
Jamie. Wow. Beautiful figure. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Jamie, for that incredible introduction and for organizing this powerful rally. It is time, after 1 month, for us to get up and to begin to fight. We had our rest. We had our time to lick our wounds, and now it is time for us to get up and to come back, because the power of this movement is undeniable. And unlike the incoming president, our record of victory is unimpeachable. And over the next 4 years, he's going to see that we are unstoppable. Because even with Donald Trump's doomsday day one agenda, we won't stop fighting for a livable future, from the halls of Congress to city streets, from the factory floor to courtrooms to Wall Street boardrooms. It will take all of us, but we are going to be all in on this fight. The planet is running a fever. There are no emergency rooms for planets, so we have to engage in the preventative care which is necessary to save this planet and the people on this planet. And we know we're going to face an uphill battle with a climate denier in chief. We also know that those hurricanes a month ago, they almost turned Mar-a-Lago into Mar-a-Lagoon. There was $300 billion worth of damage caused by 2 storms in 2 weeks. The entire defense budget of the United States is $800 billion. So we know we're right and they're wrong on every one of these issues. That's what separates us from them. And we know that Trump's cronies will be ready to crank out one attempted rollback after another. But we are not going to give up. We are not going to stop this fight. We are going to make sure that on one after another that we fight them. And we can see the cabinet that he's appointing. He's not just naming a cabinet, he's naming a cartel at the Department of Energy, at the EPA, at the Department of Interior, and we are going to get up and we are going to fight. And just like climate change won't be solved by any one president, climate action won't be stopped by any one president either. This is a revolution for climate action, for good-paying union jobs, and justice for our communities without clean air, clean water, and healthy food and homes. Our Green New Deal fight for jobs and justice and climate action is built into the DNA of the IRA. The IRA, $1 trillion spent on clean energy technologies. That is your victory, and we're going to fight to protect it. It's already created 334,000 new clean energy jobs. It's already unleashed $372 billion worth of investment in the first 2 years. And most of that money went to red states, to red congressional districts. And we're going to let them know that in 2025. We're going to let them know that they're going to vote against that bill at their own political jeopardy. Congress is a stimulus response institution. There's nothing more stimulating than hundreds of thousands of people rising up and saying, you're going to lose your job if you vote to cut those programs that are now creating jobs and saving the planet. So we've got ground to defend. We've got workers to defend. We've got energy bills to keep lower. We've got work to do to keep families and communities safer. And we need to ensure that we get that job done. So where are we going to be? Here's where we're going to be. We're going to be in a situation where these Republicans are going to try to cut the tax breaks for wind and solar and all-electric vehicles. And they're going to call it socialism, and it's got to be cut. So what do you call tax breaks for the oil, gas, and coal industry for 100 years, which they're not going to cut? And all we're going to say is, give us some of that socialism for wind and solar and all-electric vehicles and plug-in batteries so we can make sure that we have a level playing field, because we're going to be looking in the rearview mirror of history at those old fossil fuel polluting technologies. That's where we're going to be. So that's going to be our challenge. It's to stand up and to fight. Are you ready to fight? Are you ready to stand up? Do you think there was a moment when the abolitionists got a little tired, had a setback? Did they give up? No, they fought. The suffragettes, do you think they had some setbacks? Yes, they did. Did they get tired? Yes. Did they give up? No. Did they fight? Yes. The civil rights workers, when they went south, did they have some setbacks? Did they get tired? Did they give up? No. What did they do? They fought. The same-sex marriage movement, did they have setbacks? Did they get tired? Did they give up? No. What did they do? They fought. So that's where we're going to be with all of you. We're going to have to get up. We're going to have this cartel of cabinet appointees standing up in Congress to defend their historic records. So I'm going to be there fighting them every single step of the way. I'm going to make sure, following the leadership of Reverend Yearwood and Jane Fonda and all of you, that we let them know that they're in for a fight, because failure is not an option. So we need all of you to stand up to fight. Back in 2019, we had the Sunrise Movement have a climate strike in September of 2019. And that was young people rising up, demanding that preceding generations who had polluted finally took the responsibility for what they had done. That was the beginning of a revolution. And those revolutionaries are still out there, and they're you. And we in 2025 are going to have to get up. We're going to have to fight every single day. And in 2026, we're going to vote them out of office. We're just going to get rid of them. We're going to make sure that anyone who votes to cut back on any of those clean energy programs knows that they are doing it at the risk of their own job. And what's going to be at the front of this? Once again, it's going to be young people. Once again, they're going to be leading our nation. And once again, it will be the Sunrise Movement, which is doing it. And all of the environmental groups in our country, and we are so fortunate tonight because I get the honor of introducing our next speaker, Sunrise Movement Executive Director, Aru Shiny Azay. Let's give it up for Sunrise and for Aru. Let me grab all this.
Thank you. Let's give it up for Senator Markey. Hey y'all, my name is Aru Shiny Ajay. I'm 26 years old, and I was 18 when Trump was first elected. And I remember sitting there on this giant beanbag couch in my radio station in college and just lying there feeling so much despair, wondering how we could possibly fight back against this borderline authoritarian leader. And then I found Sunrise. I remember walking into my first ever Sunrise training and just being blown away by the ambition, by the love in that room, and falling in love with organizing. I dropped out of college, I started organizing full time, and we started to win. Millions of people started to strike in the streets. We won the Inflation Reduction Act. They call that Joe Manchin's climate bill. That was our climate bill. We won the American Climate Corps, a landmark program to give young people jobs fighting the climate crisis. We changed American climate history. And so, yes, I'm looking at the next 4 years, and I don't want to shy away from how hard they're going to be. I feel scared. I feel angry. I feel scared about the deportations that are going to happen in our communities. I feel scared about the way that trans students are about to be attacked. I feel scared about the way that our climate protections are going to be rolled back and that protesters are going to be targeted. And I feel so angry at the way that Donald Trump will give his corporate billionaire friends handouts, give handouts to fossil fuel companies, and go around and make life harder for working class people. I feel so angry at that. But I still feel hope because I have seen the way in which dark times can ignite flames of hope in people. And those flames of hope can make a whole generation catch fire. That's what we did last time. And we have the task to do that again, bigger and bolder. So it's really important in this moment that not only that we don't give up, but that we see that this is a critical moment in American history. That these dark days open up an opportunity where the failures of our political system are about to be ripped open for the country to see. And when those failures get ripped open, it is so important that we are there to say, you know what? We can build something better. We can build a world where our democracy doesn't work for corporations, but it works for us. We can build a world where we all have clean air and water, where we can all hope for a future, where we can live and dream of a better day. That is possible. That can be done. It is in our hands. The greatest threat of this moment is that we give in to cynicism and despair, that we give in to the messages that tell us that protest doesn't work. Protest works. Direct action works. Mass non-cooperation works. In fact, it's the only thing that has ever worked to topple dictators, to stand up to corporations. And it is on each of us to pull on our history, pull on our ancestors. I'm thinking about the lunch counter sit-ins. I'm thinking about my forefathers in India who exercised mass non-cooperation to kick a colonial power out of their country. We have that in our blood. We have that in our history. And it is time for us to pull on it. The next 4 years, we have the task of not just stopping the worst of what Donald Trump does, although we will, not just turning to protect our communities, although we will do that too, but actually contesting for the power we need to usher in a new political era where we are the ones who govern, not corporations, and where we can win Green New Deal climate legislation that builds a better world for all of us. It's easy in these moments to sink in to cynicism, but I'm gonna ask you to dream a little bit, to pull on whatever bit of you loves your family, loves your home, loves this planet deep and hard enough to fight for it. And use that to take the leap of courage that you need to take action. Whether that means showing up at a local organization's meeting, whether that means donating to a climate organization, whether that means walking out of your school, whether that means going on strike with your union. We are going to need huge leaps of courage in the next few years in order to actually stop Donald Trump and usher in a political era that works for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aru and Senator Markey. So, we've talked about the fight ahead. Now let's talk about how we can fight back. I'd like to welcome some local organizers who are leading campaigns here in DC. We have representatives from GW's Environmental Justice Action Network, woo! From GW's Orca, from Sunrise DC, from CCAN, and from Climate Defiance. Each of them is going to take a minute to share what they're working on and how you can get involved. And Bala, we'll start with you.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Amazing. So my name is Bala. I'm an organizer with Climate Defiance. I live here in DC. We are, if you haven't heard of us, we are a youth-led, nonviolent, direct action group that humiliates climate criminals wherever they may be. So they could be elected officials, oil and gas CEOs, CEOs of industry, of banks, institutions. No matter how powerful these people seem, they are just human beings. And I think that speaks to the ethos of how effective Climate Defiance is, because we are ordinary people as well, and we confront these people face to face and show them the real lives and human beings of who they are, the futures who they are screwing over with their short-term, priorities of padding their own pockets, or they're, trying to score political points. And so what makes us so effective is we harness the power of community and solidarity. When we are on a stage locking arms and being manhandled by security, there is nothing like the trust that we place in each other, and the community that we build that comes from that forces us, that inspires us actually to keep coming back and to keep putting ourselves in these situations. And so I just really want everyone, I know everyone in this room, if you were despondent on election night and you were wondering, what more you could have done and how you can support this movement over the next 4 years, we really need everyone to get off the sidelines and join us in the streets, in these, posh fundraisers, in these, in Congress, in these, spaces where these decision makers, show their faces and think that they are going to be escaping public scrutiny. We have so much power when we lead into community, and we recognize, that all of us doing this work makes it impossible for these decision makers to get away with the literal crimes that they are committing. So everyone here, everyone on this live stream, I have an ask for you. I really want you guys all, if you can make it, to join us in DC December 12th at 8 a.m. That's a Thursday. we are going to be blockading the Department of Energy, and we are going to be demanding that they end all fracked gas export applications. Yes. And this is going to be, if they do this, I mean, all of these projects that are just being proposed, they have the equivalent of 1,000 coal plants. This is not, I mean, clean energy, LNG, as the industry is trying to, greenwash it as sort of like, clean fuel. It could not be further than that. And so we need to make sure that, that the Secretary, Jennifer Granholm, is confronted and they recognize that we are not going away, that our power is not going to be taken away from us. And, so this is a long-winded way of saying this, but if you could take out your phone, go to climatedefiance.org/action and sign up there. I can't wait to join you all. It's going to be fantastic. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Quentin Scott. I'm the Federal Policy Director at Chesapeake Climate Action Network. I'm so grateful to be surrounded by so many amazing, inspiring leaders, but that also includes you in the audience. Each of you are leaders in your communities, leaders in your family, leaders in your group chat, and I'm very just grateful to be with you here this evening. We saw a clip earlier from Gaslight, and that's just a reminder of how much work we have to do and why we have to be committed over the next 4 years and beyond. So we're ready for the fight ahead. And there's so many folks out here today in this audience, and so I know our movement is as vibrant as ever. And if they thought we were done, we're not. As Reverend Yearwood said earlier, this is really just halftime. And we're gonna come out in the second half of this game and just storm forward for a victory. So this is how you can do it at the local level with CCAN. So if you live in Maryland, come to Annapolis on January 8th at 11 a.m. for the first day of session rally. We're gonna be pushing for the Renew Act, which is, my CCAN folks, which will make polluters pay for their carbon pollution. This is billions of dollars for Maryland to invest in climate action and resiliency. If you're in Virginia, join the fight for solar siting reform in Richmond. Local bans of solar energy and the permitting for solar projects has skyrocketed over the last 6 years. 6 years ago, they rejected 5% of the permits for solar energy. Now it's at 50%. And that has set Virginia back in its clean energy goals. So we need to fight in Richmond on that front. If you're right here in DC, we're organizing to stop Project Pipes, which is a plan for DC's monopoly gas utility. All of you are DC folks, so I expect you to be signing up to join this fight if you haven't already. But it's a $12 billion project, and I said $12 billion to replace existing gas infrastructure, which is gonna be obsolete because of the transition to clean energy. We've already beat Washington Gas once this summer by stopping their $672 million project, so we have experience beating them, and so now we're gonna oppose them again, and we look for everyone to be joining that fight. So bottom line is there's so much for us to do. So let's get to it. Stop by our table in the lobby. And if you're on the live stream, go to chesapeakeclimate.org and sign up today. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan Lopolis, and I'm one of the co-presidents of the Environmental Justice Action Network here at GW. Shout out. We're a student organization that is focused on education as well as action and community building around the issue of climate justice, both in DC and here on campus. If you're an undergraduate or graduate student here at GW, we'd love to have you join us. We have a number of ways to do so. We have 3 subcommittees, including a book club, a volunteering subcommittee that works with orgs around DC, and we're also launching our own initiative starting next semester. We will be bringing together students from all across DC and at their universities to push for them to curb their unbelievable amounts of waste that they contribute to our local environment. We're going to be pulling students together to collectively push to expand composting, recycling, as well as electronics disposal on campus, and also forcing them to report the waste that they are pumping into our communities. So we'd love to have you join us.
Hi, I'm Leanna from Sunrise, DC. Thank you. We are the local hub of the Sunrise Movement. That's a national youth-led movement fighting for collective liberation and a better future. We have teams working in a few different areas, including coalition building in preparation for the 2028 general strike. Pushing policies for affordable, clean, green housing here in DC, mutual aid distributions and general community care, and also taking direct action, protests, sit-ins, rallies in response to climate disasters and in line with other hubs against key power holders. We are ready to do the work that needs to be done, and we want you to join us so badly, in fact, that this Sunday we are having an open hub meeting at Potter's House from noon to 3. We would like to see you there. You can find more information about that and everything else we do at our Instagram, which is at SunriseMVMTDC. If you go to our Instagram or to our website, which is sunrisedc.org, you can find our welcome form, and we'll get you all onboarded and part of the movement. Can't wait to see you there.
Hello, my name is Ian Bergman. I'm from Organizers for Revolutionary Climate Action here at GW, also known as ORCA. We are a collection of student activists dedicated to ridding the influence of fossil fuels here at GW. We won divestment back in 2020, but I'm here to call out GW for not working on its commitment and its promise to actually remove itself as a wing of the fossil fuel corporations. It has continued to take millions of dollars from ExxonMobil and the Koch Foundation, which has destroyed the academic integrity of our institution. And they have used that to directly support deregulatory policy in the previous Trump administration, and we expect soon. They also sent the police to beat and mace and arrest us when we opposed them earlier this spring. But importantly to note, those police were the Democrat-run DCPD, and it was supported by the Biden administration. But this is not only GW and the private institutions that are responsible for the climate crisis. It is the American government and the Democratic Party, which is perpetuating the largest existential crisis that we will ever face. I want to call out Representative Frost, who's about to speak, and Senator Ed Markey for taking collectively millions of dollars from AIPAC, which they support the genocide and ecocide of Gaza, displacing millions of people. We cannot let the people who do not care about Palestinian lives chart our path forward. If they do not care about them, they do not care about us. We cannot let them come up here and talk about change when their Democratic presidential candidate's biggest climate policy was to support fracking. The only way to move forward is a grassroots effort organizing within our local communities to be oppositional to the institutions who are directly responsible for making our society non-sustainable. We need to push for an ecological and equitable future, and that is only through the solidarity of all individuals. This is our only evident option for the future and for change. Thank you.
Thank you to our amazing organizers. I'd also like to just give a very quick shout out to CAC's Climate Can't Wait rally that is happening on February 1st. It starts at 10 a.m. and we're all meeting by the Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool. So please come out if you can. Thank you so much to our organizers. Let's give them another round of applause. From campus actions to state campaigns, this is how we build power from the ground up. And speaking of building power, our next speaker knows how to do exactly that. At 26 years old, he became the first Gen Z member of Congress and has since established himself as a climate champion and as a champion for youth leadership, coming all the way from Florida, where climate impacts are hitting hardest and where Floridians are hitting back. I'd like to welcome Representative Maxwell Frost.
How's everybody doing? How's everybody doing? Well, thank you so much. It is such an honor to be here today with a room such of amazing advocates and organizers fighting, yes, for the future we deserve, but honestly, more important, the present that we deserve. I've been talking a lot about my home state of Florida, and usually I come up and I say, I'm Maxwell Frost. I'm from the great state of Florida, but now I say I'm from the beautiful state of Florida. We're a beautiful state with beautiful people. But what a lot of folks don't realize, and especially as I've traveled the country recently, we talk a lot about Project 2025, but Project 2025 is Florida 2024. The things that they want to do to this nation in terms of Christian nationalism, white supremacy, neo-fascism, they've been testing on our people, on my home, for years and years and years. And this manifests itself in the climate crisis. We're a frontline state, a frontline community that has been hit hard year after year. Can you believe right now in the state of Florida, every year we are having 3 to 4 100-year hurricanes. Hurricanes that are supposed to happen once in a century. And just about a couple months ago, I actually got a call from NOAA, and they asked me if I wanted to fly in one of the hurricanes. And I said yes. I like roller coasters. And I went on a 9-hour flight into Hurricane Milton, a hurricane that devastated so many of our communities, especially frontline communities, black and brown communities. We flew in and out of this hurricane 3 times. But within those 9 hours, I spent the whole time sitting with the climate scientists who have been doing this work since the 80s, flying into these storms. And believe it or not, I had a Republican colleague that was on the flight with me. We were both talking with them. And I said, can you tell me what your experience has been over these last 5 years with these storms, because they're getting worse and they're lasting longer? And he said, I've been doing this work since the 80s. I've been on hundreds of these flights. And I have been in the most intense flights, the most intense storms, and the most storms in the last 5 years than the last 35 years. And then I asked him, why do you think that is? And he looked us both in the face and said, it is because the climate crisis is here. And I looked at my Republican colleague, and he was just kind of stone-faced. But afterwards, I went up to him and said, what'd you think about that? Do you still believe that this isn't real, that this is a hoax? And he said, yes, I believe a lot of these scientists are politicized. I bring this up to say that we're at an event talking about the work we're gonna do, the advocacy we're gonna do. We're in a room full of organizers. And I got involved in politics when I was 15 because I didn't want to get shot. I didn't want to get shot on my block. I didn't want to get shot at my school. And 3 years after I started organizing, I survived gun violence in Orlando, and it came home to me. Well, climate crisis is coming home to people across this country and hitting us hard, as we all know. And everywhere I'm going, I'm telling folks, let's focus on the best asset, the best tool that we have as organizers, which is our stories. The story of our communities, the story of our people. Because the stories are louder than any corporate check, than any check from a polluter, than any wealthy person, than any media pundit that wants to tell us anything else. These stories are the way that we show people that the climate crisis is here. It's people in my community after Hurricane Ian that to this day still are living in sheds in the back of their homes because they received a check not big enough to help them recuperate, and because they live in an area where they were lied to when they bought their housing because they live in a black and brown community in Central Florida. It's the farm workers all across my state and all across this country that are dying at work because of extreme heat. Farm workers whose stories are oftentimes never told in DC, never told up here, and never spoken about but on the front lines of making sure our communities are fed and that we have what we need as a humanity and as a people. I think about Puerto Rico. My district has the second most amount of Puerto Ricans in the entire country. Why? Not because they wanted to move to Orlando to see Mickey Mouse, but because after Hurricane Maria, a devastating hurricane, hundreds of thousands of Puerto Ricans had to flee their homes. It's the largest group of climate refugees in the nation right now in Orlando, Florida. I bring this all up to say that I hope as we continue this work, as we work to push the administration to get out this IRA money as soon as possible, to community groups, to groups across this entire country, as we fight to make sure, of course, we elect good people up and down the ballot, as we organize to get people together to join our movements, that we center the story of now, that we center our people now, and that we center the suffering now. Because it's this vernacular of the future, as we were growing up through the climate movement, it's so distant, and now we're focusing on our people, on our stories, and on the communities that we can create with this new green economy. And that makes me excited. So I'm here to tell y'all, I know things seem really down right now. The election was horrible, of course. I think in part because we need to focus more on these issues. But the climate crisis, or the climate movement, is the most powerful it's ever been in the history of this country. Because this movement is too big to ignore, and this crisis is too big to ignore. The climate crisis is fucking real, so let's win a Green New Deal, all right? So y'all, thank you so much for having me. Let's keep fighting, let's center our stories, let's center our most vulnerable communities, and let's win this damn thing. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is working. Yes. Thank you so much, Representative Frost. We want to transition now to an incredible set of speakers who are going to take this fight against fossil fuels around the world. You know, as we've touched on a few times tonight, we have a lot of work to do here in the United States. But we also know that this struggle is global. And we know that our struggles are connected, from all the work that students here mentioned on stage to end the genocide in Gaza, to the work to help people and communities on the front lines around this planet. We need to be doing our work here in the United States to be in solidarity with all of those movements. And so our next three speakers are going to be talking about various aspects of this fight against fossil fuels and the ways that we connect the dots between different issues of corporate power, of indigenous rights, of racism, and the struggle against the industry and the world that we want to build. So we're going to go back to back with these incredible speakers. We are honored to have Stephen Donziger here with us, a lawyer who has helped lead the fight against Chevron. Joseph Givargesi from Our Revolution, who will speak about the 40th anniversary of the Bhopal disaster and the work that's happening there. And our dear friend Candy White from the Indigenous Environmental Network, who's led the fight against fossil fuels with us on the front lines of this movement. So you're going to hear from an incredible set. They're going to go back to back, and then we'll keep on moving. So without further ado, Stephen Donziger.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Jamie. I am really, truly honored to be here tonight. You know, I voted in 11 elections, by the way. I'm kind of an older dude. And I just want to say before I talk a little bit about my personal story that, you know, power is not static, okay? We can build power. We can build more power. They don't necessarily have more power than we do. We have more people than they do. And if we can get organized, we will be more powerful than them, and we will win this battle. For those of you who don't know my story, real briefly, way back in the early 1990s when I was a young lawyer, I started to represent Amazon communities in Ecuador against Chevron. Chevron had literally dumped 16 billion gallons of cancer-causing toxic oil waste into the rainforest, onto indigenous ancestral lands, into rivers and streams that the Amazon communities relied on for their drinking water, for their bathing, and for their fishing. And this was not an accident. It was done deliberately. it was a decision made at the time by Texaco, later bought by Chevron, to try to build already high profits to obscene levels at the expense of these very vulnerable communities. I first went down there in 1993 with a group of lawyers, and it literally changed my life, because when you see it, and you see these literally hundreds and hundreds of Olympic-sized swimming pools of oil waste gouge out of the jungle floor in this pristine environment in the lungs of the planet, in the Amazon. Because an oil company in the United States decided it needed to do that to make money because of its duties, its fiduciary duties to its shareholders. And it calculated that it could get away with it. Well, the communities in Ecuador, including 5 indigenous groups and farmer communities, hooked up with a bunch of lawyers, including myself, and we filed a lawsuit in 1993. It's now over 30 years later, and I want you to tell you that that lawsuit is still going on. Okay, it's still going on. And for those students among us, by the way, you guys are all so inspirational for your work, for your dedication. But I want you to understand what we're up against. We won this lawsuit in the courts of Ecuador where Chevron wanted the case to be heard and where Chevron agreed to accept jurisdiction. 2 weeks prior to a decision in the courts of Ecuador giving a victory, a historic landmark victory to the Amazon communities, they sued me. Chevron sued me personally in New York City for $60 billion. I know, it's funny you laugh, because that was sort of my reaction. Like, if it was like $1 million or $2 million, yeah. 60 billion, it's so absurd, and it was a pure intimidation play. But it so happens I am the person who got sued for the most money of any individual in the history of this country. In the meantime, the case in Ecuador was affirmed unanimously by Ecuador's Supreme Court, Ecuador's Constitutional Court, and by Canada's Supreme Court for enforcement purposes. There was voluminous evidence that they had deliberately dumped this toxic waste. But rather than pay the communities they poisoned, they tried to destroy me. And over a period of years, as I was fighting this parallel case in New York while we were winning the case in Ecuador, they figured out a scheme to actually incarcerate me. And what happened is they got a judge, a pro-Chevron judge, to issue an order that I was to turn over my computer to them, my confidential case file. And I contested this order, I appealed it, and while I was appealing this clearly unconstitutional order, by the way, that's never happened before either, the judge charged me with criminal contempt of court for protecting the attorney-client privilege, for protecting the right of my clients to their confidential information. That charge was taken to the U.S. attorney in New York to prosecute me. The U.S. attorney, appointed by Trump in his first term, refused to prosecute me. The case was such BS. So the judge at that point did something I've never seen before. He appointed a private corporate law firm to step into the shoes of the U.S. government and prosecute me directly. I got prosecuted in a criminal case, misdemeanor case, by a corporate law firm acting in the name of the government. And worse, this law firm had Chevron as a client. Law firm, by the way, is called Seward and Kissel. Thank you. Please, it's shameful. It is shameful. And regardless, by the way, of your politics, I mean, Republican, Democrat, wherever people are, this is crazy. This is crazy land. It's so offensive to the rule of law. And Chevron basically had me locked up on a misdemeanor prior to trial on this crazy theory that I was a risk of flight. And I ended up spending literally 993 days at home with an ankle bracelet, and then 6 weeks of that in a federal prison on this baseless contempt of court charge. Now, I'm through that period, but I still don't have my passport. They took my law license without a hearing. And I don't have a bank account because they got an order from the judge that I was to reimburse them millions of dollars for their legal fees they used to persecute me. Now, that's the story. My period of detention ended 2.5 years ago. I'm good, I'm writing a book, I'm doing my work, I'm doing my advocacy. Still mindful of the fact the Ecuadorian communities have this judgment that needs to be enforced against Chevron's assets. But also, I want people to understand that while I think my case, thank God, is a bit of an outlier, it also is a dangerous sign that there is a corporate playbook that will be used when it can be used against environmental activists who might be a little too successful at creating too much financial risk for fossil fuel companies. And you know, it's not just me. We're seeing this in a case right now, a SLAP case, SLAP meaning like a harassment lawsuit filed by Energy Transfer Partners against Greenpeace in the courts of North Dakota, where Greenpeace USA faces a potential $300 million liability on the theory that the protests that they participated in, indigenous-led protests against the Dakota Access Pipeline, interfered with the business operations of Energy Transfer and caused economic damage. And these are what happened to me, what's happening to Greenpeace, what's happening to other people, are, make no mistake about it, attempts to criminalize the climate justice movement. Attempts to make us look like we're bad people. Attempts to make us look like we're even terrorists for engaging in First Amendment protected advocacy, for doing the work that needs to be done to save this planet. So I don't want anyone to walk away feeling whoa or demoralized about my story, like I've never really seen this happen to anyone else. I want to tell the young people, especially among us, you can do this work without getting arrested. Or if you choose to engage in nonviolent civil disobedience, maybe you want to get arrested to make a political point. But what happened to me is very unusual. But it's maybe not that unusual, given the incoming administration and the things they've been saying about wanting to go after protesters and people who dissent from their prevailing worldview. So my final point, when we think about climate justice, when we think about battling the fossil fuel industry, we must connect it to our freedoms, to our democracy, to the rule of law. We cannot forget that to preserve what we understand to be our liberal democracy, despite all of its many, many flaws, the reality is it gives us the freedom to do this work, and there are forces out there in industry, and now with the support, I believe, of many in the incoming administration who want to take that away. So be mindful that as we fight for climate justice, we must also fight to protect the rule of law and our democracy. And one final thing is I'm seeking a pardon from President Biden right now. And if maybe some of you know that I think there's a pardon Donziger sign out there. Oh my God, this is awesome. Thank you. I just want to say this about the pardon. Most people who seek a pardon have either been convicted of a crime, pled guilty to a crime. Okay, we all saw that the president pardoned his son. Fine, okay, I get it. But pardon people who actually are innocent. Pardon people who deserve mercy, like Leonard Peltier. Okay. The great indigenous leader who's been in prison for 50 years? 50 years? Okay? So I am really asking President Biden to look at least my case and use it to send a clear message to our society that private corporate criminal prosecutions will never happen again in this country to anybody, okay? Go to freedonziger.com, you can sign the petition, call the White House switchboard, crash it, demanding I be pardoned, and thank you so much for your support. And Jane Fonda, my old friend, thank you so much for your leadership for so many decades on all sorts of political issues. You're awesome. And Maxwell Frost, I just want to say this about electeds, okay? Any elected leader that comes out of community organizing is someone I start off by really trusting, okay? Too many of our elected leaders are not connected to the community. Okay? Thank you, Maxwell, for your leadership. You're an inspiration. Thanks to all of you. I really am honored to be here. Thank you so much.
Hey guys, if you're holding up the banner, yeah, we just want to do a photo. Could you be standing right here or like in front? Yeah, amazing. Beautiful. Okay. Amazing, thank you.
Brothers and sisters, good evening. My name is Joseph Givargis, and I'm the executive director of Our Revolution, the progressive political action group that was started by Bernie Sanders. Our Revolution members across the country stand in solidarity with everybody in this room and everybody who's watching online as we fight for a future where corporations can no longer pillage and plunder our planet. But we got to remember this, as we fight for our future, we need to remember our past. Today, progressive members of Congress, led by U.S. Representative Pramila Jayapal and U.S. Senator Jeff Merkley, introduced a resolution to designate December 3rd as National Chemical Disaster Awareness Day, so we don't forget the worst industrial accident in the history of the world. 40 years ago today, on December 3rd, 1984, the Union Carbide pesticide plant in Bhopal, India, released 40 tons of toxic gas into the air. It killed thousands overnight, and it left over 500,000 people injured. As a child, I remember being horrified by the scenes on TV, and I remember my parents worrying about whether our friends and family were among those harmed. This mass casualty event left its victims burned, blinded, poisoned, and plagued by chronic disease. And even now, their children and their children's children continue to birth babies who are disfigured and suffer illness. Even today, the soil and water in Bhopal are toxic. 40 years later, the death toll stands at 25,000 souls. And that number ticks up every single day. The victims, who are supported by the International Campaign for Justice in Bhopal, have spent decades demanding accountability. But the justice they seek has been thwarted by corporate powers and their government enablers. U.S. presidents from Ronald Reagan to Donald Trump to Joe Biden have shielded Union Carbide and its parent company, Dow Chemical, from prosecution. And even worse, Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, has allowed Dow Chemical to expand its business footprint all across India. This is unacceptable. The truth is that Bhopal was more than a disaster. It was a crime against humanity. It was a crime born of corporate negligence and government greed. It's a crime that is intergenerational. It travels through time, and it reminds us why it is critical to hold polluters accountable. Bhopal wasn't an isolated incident. It was really a warning about our future. Think about the toxic train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, or the hundreds of hazardous chemical incidents that happen every year, at least one a day in the United States. These disasters disproportionately harm low-income communities and people of color, the very people who lack the resources and the power to hold corporations and government accountable. And I want to be clear, these incidents are not accidents. The ongoing poisoning of our planet is the direct result of decisions made in boardrooms and rubber stamped by politicians who put polluter profits over public health. Brothers and sisters, it's time for us as citizens, as activists, to send a clear message to corporations. If you poison our air, if you poison our soil, if you poison our water, and if you destroy our future, you will be held to account. Whether it's Dow Chemical refusing to answer for the crime in Bhopal, or ExxonMobil continuing to lie about climate change, the days of letting corporate America off the hook has to end. And brothers and sisters, as we remember the victims of Bhopal in our hearts, let's honor the survivors right now by fighting for a world where chemical disasters like this are not allowed to happen again. And one way you can help in this fight right now is by asking your member of Congress to co-sponsor the resolution that was introduced today. For more information, you can go to bhopal.net. That's BHOPAL.net. That's the website of the International Campaign for Justice in Bhopal. And once you're there, click the call to action link, and that'll guide you on the script to call your member of Congress. Brothers and sisters, this isn't just about accountability for the past. This is about fighting for the future that we want to create. Bhopal should have been a turning point. And even 40 years later, we, the people, can make sure that December 3rd is always remembered as Chemical Disaster Awareness Day. Thank you.
Hey everybody, how you doing tonight? Woo! Give it up for these incredible speakers that we've had tonight. Give it up for yourselves. Look at you. Hi. Hi, way back there. I see you back there. Hi. Doja Maraguat. Hello, relatives. I am so excited to be here tonight. I actually am humbled to be here because it's been a really long time. I thought, man, organizing is so hard. And I thought, I wonder if anybody can relate to this. Does anybody agree to this? Who thinks this work is so hard? Raise your hands. Oh, some of you think it's easy. All right, good for you. All right. Trust me, I know exactly how hard it is because you know where I'm from? I'm from North Dakota. It is hard. I don't know if you know this, but recently the incoming administration, God, it's hard for me to even say his name. I've always called him number 45. Now I have to call him another number. Can't believe it, but he elected the governor of North Dakota, Doug Burgum, for the Secretary of the Interior. You know what their mandate is? Drill, baby, drill. Oh, my gosh. And then they have this new National Energy Council that they created. And apparently, Doug Burgum, governor of North Dakota, is going to lead this council to create energy dominance. And I was like, holy, are we in the twilight zone? Did I forget to wake up from that nightmare? But no, here we stand. And this burden sometimes feels really heavy. You're walking along and you're just like, oh gosh, this is a really heavy burden to bear. How do I do this? And it's with all of you. And it's with the people who stand behind us. And it's when we stand together. So if you can at this moment, I would really appreciate it if you could stand. Stand up with me. Stand up with me and do me a favor. And you can close your eyes or not, but I want you to turn around. And I want you to look at your parents or the ones that raised you. I want you to have them in your mind's eye. I want you to think about your grandparents, your great-grandparents, your great-great-grandparents. Go all the way back as far as you can and remember them right now in your mind's eye. And think about who they are. Now I want you to turn back around. And I want you to either close your eyes or not, but look ahead to that future. Envision it. Envision it for you, but for when way beyond when you're even here anymore. What's it going to look like for you? What's it going to look like all those generations ahead? Because if we don't remember our ancestors who have our back, where we came from,
we're not going to be able to know where we're going and where we want to be, despite whoever is in that position of power. Because they never were really there. Not for me. I brought somebody with me here because she has been my rock. May she rest in peace. This is my grandma, my dad's mom. Her name was Salina Youngbear. Now, sometimes back home, people say, gee, you Hiradzo women, you're really mean. They used to say, gee, Candy, your grandma, she's kind of scary. She's kind of mean. But you know what? Grandma was tough. Grandma went to a boarding school. And guess what? She survived. And her parents before her and her parents before her, way back to the makings of this country that we now call the so-called USA, which is founded on the genocide of indigenous peoples who were here. But we survived. I am here on this stage as a survivor myself of cancer from the toxins in my community because my grandmother survived. We're fighters. We come from a long line of warriors, a long line of people who said, you know what, doesn't even matter who's the so-called president or the so-called leader of an entire country, because we're going to fight, and we're going to fight for our children to survive. Not only to survive, but to thrive. Yes, that's right. I came here today, even though my kids were like, Mom, do you have to go? Because I wasn't going to. On November 8th, I woke up like, I'm done. I'm just going to stay in bed today. And my 5-year-old son, Winter Eagle, said, you go, Mom. You go, girl. It cracked me up. My 11-year-old son, my 11-year-old daughter, Ayana, said, you know what, Mom? You paved the way. Doesn't matter if Trump's in there right now because one day I'm going to be the president. I was like, what? Yes! Yes, you are my girl. And I wanted to talk about one thing. Somebody brought it up earlier. I was so happy to hear it. Something about DAPL. Who remembers that? Dakota Access Pipeline. You remember Minnie Wachoni? Minnie Wachoni! Minnie Wachoni! Minnie Wachoni! Minnie Wachoni! Yes, I haven't heard that forever. 2016, he just got done talking about the battles. Well, guess what? Just because the media went away doesn't mean we're not still here fighting. Yes, we're going to the courts. They're scared. They keep pushing the dates back because they know they were wrong. So my request for you all here today is to not forget about the indigenous peoples and the grassroots. Because guess what we're doing at home? We're saving our seeds. Not those GMO corn seeds, our seeds. Yes, we are. We're planting our gardens. We're teaching our kids how to plant those gardens. And we're doing the grassroots works on the ground because that's where it is. We have to stand with our brothers and our sisters. And I'm so happy you all are still standing. I forgot to tell you that you could actually sit down if you wanted to. I appreciate that, Jane Fonda. I'm sorry. I forgot to tell you. Making my elders here stand up and just be all over here. My grandma would be laughing at me right now. Kids these days. But to support the grassroots and to really remember I need help. There was a group that came out. I need help bird dogging Doug Burgum. Write that name down. I'm going to need help. I haven't sat down with him yet, but when I do, I'm going to have a lot of fun. Talking about what we need for the future of North Dakota because he does not represent me as a constituent. And he's going to hear all about it. If there's anything that we can do, it's fight. Fight for our continued existence and our right to survive and to thrive. For all the generations that came behind us, for all the generations that are to come before us. Stand for justice. Stand for your brothers and sisters. Right? Because we have to stand. Do we want to do it again? Let's stand up. Come on, everybody. All right? Repeat after me. We stand. With our brothers and our sisters. We stand for justice, For all people. We stand to fight for our future. We stand with our brothers and our sisters. We stand. We stand. We stand. That's my time, everybody. I love you so much. Peace out. We'll see you tonight. Woo!
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Let's give it up for Candy one more time. So, you all, we are coming towards the end of our program. Thank you so much for sticking with us, from hearing from these incredible speakers. We want to talk about a final way that we are finding to take on big oil, especially over the next 4 years. I'm really glad Candy brought up family. I have a 3-year-old daughter now, and like many of you, I think we worry as parents, or as anybody, about the world that we're passing on to our kids. So many of us now are living firsthand with climate disasters in our communities. I think everybody in this room has maybe lived through the hurricanes we've seen, the record wildfires, the heat wave that hit here in DC. We've seen our skies filled with smoke from Canadian wildfires or others out west. We've lived through those disasters, or we know people who have. We know the climate crisis doesn't hit people the same way, that racism and poverty and a lack of access to resources mean that those impacts aren't shared equally. But make no mistake, everybody now is being impacted. That's something that we all share as a human experience, and it's something that we should be organizing around. And so, all across the country now, communities are coming together and finding ways to connect the dots between the climate disasters they're seeing, the industry they know that caused that, and who is going to pay for the damage that's been done. So this Make Polluters Pay campaign that so many of the groups who helped put on tonight are a part of, and so many of you have been supporting, is our growing effort to really point the finger clearly and say it's time for big oil to pay for the damage that they've done. All across the country right now, cities, states, counties, municipalities are finding ways to file lawsuits against the fossil fuel industry. More than 30 cities, states, and counties have already filed suit. Last week, the state of Maine became the 9th state in the country to sue big oil for climate deception. And lawsuits aren't the only way. States are also passing climate superfund bills that are pieces of legislation that would raise money from oil and gas companies to help pay for climate damages in that state. The mighty state of Vermont. Any Vermonters in the house? Oh, I see someone pointing. The mighty state of Vermont became the first state in the country to pass a climate superfund bill that will make oil and gas companies pay for climate damages. That was back in May. In June, the New York State legislature passed a similar bill that would raise $75 billion to pay for climate damages in the state of New York. And the only thing that is holding up that bill from becoming law is that it needs Kathy Hochul to put her signature on that bill. So there you go. So over the next few days and weeks, we are working with groups across New York State and around the country, because this bill has national resonance, to pressure Governor Hochul to sign that bill before the end of the year. New York will be the next state that passes a climate superfund bill, but it won't be the last. There are more states following behind: Massachusetts, Minnesota, Oregon, California, Delaware, Maryland, Jersey. Others have already proposed legislation, and we think that there could be many, many more in the days and weeks to come. That is our job now, is to use every tool in our toolbox outside of DC, but back in our communities, to find ways to hold this industry accountable. And so, our next two speakers are going to talk about different ways that that's getting done. First up, Cora Martin is from Asheville, North Carolina. We all know what happened in that community. Cora lived through the impacts of Hurricane Helene, but has taken that experience and used it to fuel her own activism and drive. She's been finding ways to share her story. We are so honored that she took the time to be with us here tonight to tell us about that experience and how she is finding ways to point the finger at big oil and keep up the fight. So, without further ado, Cora Martin.
Hello, everybody. As Jamie said, my name is Cora Martin. I am a 17-year-old student from Asheville, North Carolina, and my hometown is on my mind. The families lost and separated are on my mind, the 53 days without drinkable water. Toxic mud, bucket showers, mudslides, destroyed infrastructure, the devastated ecosystems, livelihoods, children, art, communities. Yeah, my hometown is on my mind. It is no longer just my future, it's the reality of our present on my mind. A few years ago, Asheville was described as a climate haven. Our mountains were to protect us from severe weather, such as tornadoes and hurricanes. We became a refuge for those escaping hurricanes and extreme heat across the East Coast. Yet after the destruction caused by Helene, we can see that nowhere is safe from a climate disaster. I think it's hard for anyone to imagine that they would live through one directly in their hometown, especially when yours is 500 miles inland, secluded in the mountains. But it happened. On September 27th, Hurricane Helene hit western North Carolina, causing the water to rise 28 feet before cresting, leaving thousands without water, power, or any means of communication. It is truly hard for anyone to imagine that they would live through a climate disaster in high school, but it is our reality. That within a matter of days, the rivers would rise beyond their banks and bring picnic tables to the tops of trees, wiping out communities, and that mudslides would so rapidly fall, making roads impassable. That our currency would become plastic water bottles and a shared smile, and strangers would be flushing strangers' toilets with 5-gallon buckets, performing missing persons checks across the county, knocking on doors and not knowing what may lay beyond that threshold. Yet there would be tents of supplies going up along every road you see, and military vehicles continuously coming in alongside the truckloads of supply donations, while road closure signs and now turned gravel roads were around every corner you turned. You drive by what used to be your favorite places, now turned debris fields, and remember what memories those little plots of land hold. Or walk a street along a river, eyes wide as you take in the sights of homes leveled by the force of water and ask yourself what happened to those families. In the early days, the sound of helicopters and sirens on rescue missions echoed in your head, and the scent of sewage filled your nose. The dirt caked on your skin and under your fingernails as you volunteered in any way that you could, watching as the death toll only continued to rise, hoping that one day it would soon all stop. Yet there was beauty in the ways that the community came together. People of all backgrounds were united and guarded by masks and gloves, picking up bags upon bags of debris that the floods brought in. Whatever skills one possessed, they brought them to the table. Yet it is still surreal and intense knowing that some of the places you hold closest to your heart have become unrecognizable rubble. This is not an original experience. Hurricane Katrina, Milton, Harvey, Irma, Matthew, Sandy, California wildfires, flooding in Valencia, Spain, heat waves and monsoons. The excessive burning of fossil fuels is increasing the force and frequency of natural disasters that are consistently devastating more and more of our home planet. And in the same way that communities of color and low-wealth areas bear the burden from fossil fuel pollution, marginalized communities were left most vulnerable in the wake of these climate disasters. Families with financial resilience and a safety net are better positioned to rebuild and recover their homes and livelihoods, while those in the margins continue to struggle. Climate resiliency must be practiced to acknowledge the ongoing injustices in our modern world. As continuously demonstrated, climate change is an amplifier for division, a threat multiplier. It is the intersection of human rights and social injustice. We are actively facing a crisis of pollution, environmental racism, deforestation, and over-extraction. People and ecosystems are continuously suffering, and we need a radically different system to address these crises, a system that President Donald Trump does not plan to enact. In fact, as said, Trump's current environmental plans release upwards of 4 billion tons of carbon emissions into the atmosphere, a plan funded and supported by big fuel corporations. Like Western North Carolina has come together to restore and rebuild, it is essential that as a movement we come together to hold these big corporations accountable for the increasing harm that is caused to places like Asheville. We all have our role. It looks different for everyone. For some, it's direct action or policy change. Others, it's marching in the streets and fundraising. Another way is coming to events like this, so thank you all for being here. Personally, I have recently found my role to be listening. Following Helene, I have gone out across Western North Carolina with my recorder, headphones, a basket of waters, and homemade banana breads in hand, ready to hold space for those willing to tell their story. I find the tears will always roll across my cheeks no matter how many people I hear. I dream of gathering these stories into one place, of making a podcast so everyone is able to hear them, for these stories are what hold the most power, because we must listen to every voice, because it is now every single life that is being affected. We must all do our part, and for you, I am grateful that our current reality is on your mind. There is only more work to be done in Asheville and its surrounding areas, just as there is globally. As you all stand with Western North Carolina, we will stand with you in the fight against climate injustice and for climate action. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cora, for sharing your story. We're so grateful that you could be here with us tonight. We know that many of these extreme weather events are not just natural disasters. They can be directly linked to the climate crisis and to the burning of fossil fuels. We also know that this crisis we find ourselves in is not just a tragedy, it's a crime. These disasters are becoming all too common, but they're not inevitable. We have someone here tonight who's working to make sure that polluters pay their fair share for climate damages and that our communities are safe and protected and prepared when these disasters come. Everyone, please give a warm welcome to Representative Melanie Stansbury.
All right. Good evening. How are you all doing? All right, we still got some energy in the house. I am Melanie Stansbury, and I am deeply proud to represent New Mexico's 1st Congressional District, right in the heart of central New Mexico. And I am also deeply proud to have been in the fight as a warrior for climate justice my entire career. And as we wrap up this night, as I know it's been a long night, but hopefully an inspiring night to get us back into the fight, I want to share with all of you a little bit of my story, a little bit of how I ended up as a member of Congress, a little bit about how I have carried the fight from my hometown to the halls of Congress, and how I am looking ahead to the vision of what not only we have to defend in the upcoming years, but what we will build with our vision, with our strength, with our grit, with our determination, and our fight for this planet and for our people. Now, I come from a state where our people have lived there since time immemorial. Countless generations of indigenous communities who have lived on those lands and called them home, stewards of lands and waters, and before we even called it the climate. For us, lands are sacred. They are part of the cultures of our people, our languages, our histories, and who we are. And so as I grew up in New Mexico, it was only natural that I, like so many people from our communities, would end up working in natural resources. But one of the things that I never expected is that I would end up standing here today as a congresswoman in front of you. You see, I grew up in a working class family. My mother was a seamstress. She was fired from working in a factory, in a Levi's factory, for trying to organize a union. And when she got fired, she went to go work for the operating engineers union. And when she found out how much men were making on the job site, my mother dispatched herself and became one of the first women machine operators in the state of New Mexico. And relevant to this fight, helped to build one of the power plants that is currently closing in New Mexico as part of the energy transition. And so when I say that I have lived my entire life on the front lines of this battle, my mother was literally carrying me in her body when she was helping to build that power plant. So I have literally been on the front lines of this battle my entire career. But I started my career as a science teacher, and I never thought that I would end up in politics. I ended up going to graduate school and studying tribal water rights issues and working on the front lines with tribal leaders and indigenous communities for the restoration of tribal water rights. And in 2010, I came to Washington, D.C. as a hopeful intern on the Hope and Change train and came with a suitcase packed to work as an intern for 6 months and stayed for 7 years. I worked in the Obama administration for 4 years and then took a job in the United States Senate where I wrote climate and clean energy and water legislation and worked with tribal governments. And when Donald Trump was elected in 2016, I will never forget the feeling I had when I woke up the next morning. I didn't know how I would get out of bed and go back to work. I didn't know why or how we could continue the fight. Now, in the 9 months that passed after Donald Trump got elected, I decided to move home to New Mexico. I went home and I thought, I'll never go back to Washington, D.C. I packed up my car and I sold everything I owned, put all my stuff on the curb in Adams Morgan, and people took it within moments. And literally within a day of my getting home to Albuquerque, I got a phone call from a neighbor who said, "We think you should run for the New Mexico State Legislature." So in 2017, I launched an improbable race for an unwinnable state house race in New Mexico. And a year and a half later, I was elected not only as the first woman and the first Democrat to represent New Mexico's 28th House District, but I won by 7 points. And I won because we organized, because we didn't take no for an answer, because we didn't take an improbable cause and say we couldn't do it. And we knew that the long-term plan of trying to win that race and continue to change our community might not happen in that first race, and we were in it for the long haul. In fact, when I had left Washington, D.C., my mentor, who I had worked with in the Obama administration, had told me as she walked out the door the last time I saw her, "Chin up, you have to play the long game. This is the long game. You are the long game." And so I took my seat in the New Mexico State Legislature, and just a year and a half later, I got a phone call just a few hours after President Biden tapped our country's very first Indigenous Cabinet Secretary, Deb Haaland, to be the Secretary of Interior. And she was my Congresswoman. And some folks asked, "Well, it's your turn to run." And I said, "Me? Doesn't somebody else want to do this? I'm not sure I signed up for this." And they said, "It's your turn." And so I launched another improbable race. And not only did we win that race, and Secretary Haaland is now here serving in this beautiful city, transforming the way that we engage with tribal governments and communities, taking the climate crisis all around the world and the solutions that we have to tackle, and protecting our public lands and waters. I have been serving now as the youngest woman to ever represent New Mexico's 1st congressional district in Congress. And so I think it's important that we tell our stories, that we remember the long game, that we remember the long history, because when you think about all of the progress that has been made, not only during this administration, but since Donald Trump was first elected in 2016, when I ran in the 2018 race, Emily's List told me that the largest number of women to ever run for office and ask for their help was 900 women in 2016. In 2018, 42,000 women ran for office all across the country. As we think about 2026, let's make it 100,000 women and people of color and non-binary people because that is the long game. We are not going to transform this country. We are not going to transform our communities unless people step up and answer the call, because our body politic is us. It's not someone out there who's going to go out and do it for us. It's you. It's the people in this room who are going to go out there and organize. Some of you are going to go out there and run. Some of you are going to go out there and help other candidates. But you are the long game. You are the people who are going to save this planet. It is you and your generation and all of us working on this together. So I want to say to all of you, do not give up hope. This is just the beginning. When you think about everything that we have accomplished, when I first was elected to the state legislature, people told me, because I had run in a red district, that I couldn't run climate legislation. Well, I sponsored the first comprehensive climate bill ever in New Mexico history, and we passed it in our first try. And in my first year in Congress, I got to be a part of passing the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the largest single investment in climate change and clean energy, not only in the history of the United States, but the history of the world. That is the long game. We know the dark days are in front of us. I woke up 2 weeks ago with the same feeling in my stomach that I had in 2016 when I was living here in Washington, D.C. Like many of you, I asked the same questions. What did we get wrong? How could we have missed it? What could we have done differently? I traveled to 14 states working to try to get Kamala elected and helping our battleground districts up and down the ballot. And what I see is that although we won the battle, we have not won the war. We have not lost the war. I just said that totally wrong. Though we have lost the battle, we have not lost the war. I got it. You don't always get it right. But it's the truth. You know, when you think about it over the long history and the long game, my grandmothers were born in this country at a time when women could not legally vote. My mother was a single mother fired from a factory job just trying to survive. And here I am standing here as your congresswoman, having just campaigned for our country's very first woman of color to run as a major party ticket nominee, and she got 74 million votes. The battle is not over. As I look ahead to the Congress ahead, that is why I'm announcing that I'm introducing our polluter pay bill. I believe that we have significant opportunity to advance the ball, to hold corporations accountable, to continue our work on the climate justice front that we must do for all of our communities, that we have to continue the battle to protect our indigenous communities, to fight for land and water, and to do everything that we can to protect the people who are on the front lines. And that is exactly what our polluter pays bill will do. So as all of you leave this auditorium tonight and you think about what is the long game and what your role is, I want you to think about what your role is in the long durée of history and moving this ball forward. Shortly before Martin Luther King Jr. died, he gave a famous speech not far from here. And he talked about the politics of despair, and that one of the greatest risks of our time was giving in to the politics of despair. We cannot give in to the politics of despair over the next 4 years. We must continue to hew the stone of hope, and we must continue to bend the arc of history towards justice, and we must continue to organize, to fight, and to get out there and win these races, win these battles, and win this war to save our planet and save our communities. And you all are going to make that happen. So get out there and go win the war. Let's do this, everyone.
So I've been given the task of sending us back out on the field. Tonight we've heard a lot. And as we started, we heard that this is not an argument, but a fight. So let me say this, because doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, is the definition of insanity. So we're not going to go back out there the same way. But let me say this to you. In sports, when someone is tired, they tap the top of their head. I need to tell you, for those who are watching and those who are here, if you feel overwhelmed, if you feel you need to take time to take care of yourself. One of my dear friends in this movement, Representative Justin J. Pearson, from the great state of Tennessee, has been an advocate with us, but he received news that his brother had committed suicide last week. There are so many people who are giving up hope. I need to be real with you that the road ahead will not be easy. I don't want to just give you the rah-rah before we go out. Because the reality is, there were thousands who have died because of heat. There are children who literally have drowned themselves trying to avoid heat waves. There are hurricanes and floods. You heard about what happened in Asheville. You heard what happened because of Hurricane Milton. These things will continue. The youngest victims from Hurricane Helene were 1 month old. Kaiser and Kashmir Williams. Their mother, Kobe Williams, 28. They died because they were afraid to leave their home in the storm. They will not be here for the second half of this fight. Many of those will not be with us to see how this fight ends, to get to 2030 or beyond. So every day that you have to fight, to stand up, not for Republican or Democrat, but for humanity. Every day, you have the ability to continue to ensure that we transition from fossil fuels to clean energy. You must continue to fight. And so there's some next steps that we've learned today. Step one, you must have courage. You must have courage. Step two, you must have compassion. We cannot be the movement that does not love anymore. We cannot be the white paper energy movement anymore. We cannot try to tell our arguments or prove our case. We must actually love human beings. Third, as Jane Fonda said, we must use culture and do storytelling. We must do this differently. So I just came back from Korea. I was there fighting for a plastic treaty with so many amazing activists and other leaders in the world. We are not alone. We are not alone. But this is how quickly things change. By the time I got on my flight and landed here, the entire country was in an uproar. That is how fast things can change. So this is not just some 2026 or 2028. This is an everyday thing. So on international, we must continue to push and join our neighbors. They are watching us. I am telling you, I saw Panama and Ecuador and all these countries, the small Caribbean countries and other countries, they are watching everything we do, and they are leading on that for inspiration themselves. So one, on the international front, we have INC Now 5 Part 2. Yes, it will be with whatever administration, but that is Part 2. We must continue to fight for a strong plastic treaty. COP30 in the Amazon. We must organize for that. On the national level, you heard it, we must continue to push for states like New York and other states to embrace strong climate legislation. And you heard from Rashida, we must stop LNG. And we must gather and organize and mobilize to do that. You heard from Attorney Dossinger, and you heard him say quite clearly why important we must have litigation. And I will tell our young people, demonstration without litigation leads to frustration. We must join them things together. And then finally, there's a fight in our own backyards, where I'm from, in the great state of Louisiana, in a place called Cancer Alley, where my neighbors are dying. And they have sent me here in many ways to tell you that this segregated, siloed, quote-unquote progressive climate movement will not work. We must be a movement that is black and brown and red and female and straight and gay and theist and atheist. We must be unified as humans, because this battle is clear. It is one side organized money and the other side organized people. But I will tell you this, organized people beats organized money every single time, as long as people are organized. And the last thing, we have a petrochemical fight. Let me close with this. I need us to then huddle or rise, and then we're going to march out. When the destruction took place in East Palestine and the trail derailment took place, I went to East Palestine. And I never will forget it, because they said, well, it's mostly white people and mostly MAGA and mostly Republican. But when I went there, understanding what I went through from Hurricane Katrina, and went there to East Palestine, Ohio, I was never hugged by so many white people in my life. Some wearing MAGA hats, some wearing Trump t-shirts, but all Americans facing a crisis. I came back, no names to be told. I told the current administration, from the highest ranks, you need to go to East Palestine, Ohio. You must show your face. You know who did? Who launched his campaign actually from the first environmental justice site ever as a presidential candidate? Donald Trump. Went there, throwing hats, being ridiculous, but he went to East Palestine. So I don't want to hear about this thing where we can't come together. Republicans, by 80%, say they want clean water. Not so hot for clean air, I'm not sure why, but they want clean water. That's the inroad. So we can stop plastics. We can stop vinyl chloride. We can stop petrochemicals. But we can only do it if we come together. Are y'all with that? Are y'all with that? Are y'all with that? So let's rise to our feet. Let's rise to our feet. Can we get ready to go out? Put your fist in the air so the whole world can see you. Say, we have. Oh, they need to hear you. We have. I need you back in the green room. If you're in the green room, in the backstage, in the area, I need your fist in the air. If you backstage, all right. Thank you, Jamie. I need your fist online. We have not given up. We have not given up. We are fighting for future generations. For future generations. For future generations. We stand up. We live in the path of our ancestors. All those who have lost their lives, we have not forgotten you. We stand with you. We love you. And we fight on. And we fight on. And we fight on. All power. All power to the people. All power. All power to the people. Now make some noise and let's go get them. God bless you. The climate fight starts now.
Conseguir lo que